Welcome to kpod, the podcast about Korean Americans and arts and culture from Korean American Story. The episode you're about to hear is our conversation with the one and only Margaret Cho. Ever since Juliana and I started doing this podcast, Margaret has been pretty much at the top of our list. In 1994, she became hands down the most famous Korean person in the country with her sitcom All-American Girl. That show, over which Cho had no creative control, only lasted 19 episodes and was critically panned. After its cancellation, Cho fell into a spiral of depression and drug addiction, an experience she channeled into her groundbreaking one-woman show, I'm the One That I Want, in 1999. In the years since, she's built a fervent following for her bawdy and confessional material targeting racism, homophobia, fat shaming, the entertainment industry, and of course herself, and also her mother. Margaret has a very demanding touring schedule, but because of the pandemic, she's been at home in Los Angeles, which is where Juliana and I were finally able to connect with her. We loved hearing about her childhood, her coming of age, her dog, her championing of the LGBTQ community, her recent experience on the reality show The Masked Singer, and her favorite Korean dramas. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Thank you so much, Margaret, for doing the podcast.
Thank you. This is great.
Can you tell us where you are and just give us a little bit of a visual setup?
I'm in my home in Los Angeles. I moved my furniture around. So we're in front of my piano, which I haven't been playing very much, although I have been playing since I was a child. I'm like most Korean American kids. Mm-hmm, we got to play piano. You know, we all sort of have that sort of like Korean upbringing. Well, my generation, we had 7 days of school because you had school every day. And then, of course, you had Korean school on Saturday, and then Sunday school on Sunday. And then, but you also had after school, you had piano lessons and probably some kind of either kumon or some older Korean male coming over to tutor you in something. And so that there was like a lot of schooling, but I think that because of that, I always want to go to like some kind of Korean school or math school or piano school. I can't do something without schooling.
Well, I couldn't get away from that fast enough. I always walked out of there like, I don't even know what I was doing there. I didn't learn anything, and I had to go every week, and it was always the same.
It's like collective trauma of Saturday schools.
It's so frustrating because I think it may have been because I realize now it was because they were working all the time and they kind of didn't know what to do with me. So I think that it was maybe the guilt of not being able to spend time with their kids. That's why they were putting us in school. I thought it was just like punishment or torture, but it was really out of a kind of a guilt of having to work.
Margaret, are you an only child?
No. I have a brother who he is 5 years younger than me. And so he had a pretty different, I think boys and girls have different experiences, mostly because of, you know, just the way that we're treated is differently growing up. But also my parents were in a very different financial situation because he came along when they were like able to buy a house. They were financially much more secure. They had citizenship. So they had like a lot of different, he had a lot of different advantages that they didn't have when I was born, gotten deported. There was all these sort of traumas that happened. And so I had sort of absorbed a lot of that in my upbringing. And so we had a different experience of childhood. So he had to go to like, he had the sort of different thing where he had to go to like Camp Conifer, which is a whole nother kind of trauma, which is when they were like kind of trying to return to the Koreanness. Like he had a real Americanization of, his Koreanness, like they were trying to return to being Korean, whereas we had sort of the more educational upbringing, I think. The kids that were sort of my age, I think that was more our experience.
Margaret, you've had a very different Korean American story than a lot of other Korean Americans that I've met in my life. First of all, what I was so interested was the fact that your parents actually did own a bookstore, and it was a gay bookstore. Because when you had your show, I thought that was just invented for the show because it was a great setting. I don't even know any Koreans of my parents' generation that had a bookstore, liquor store, deli, dry cleaner. So can you tell us a little bit about how that even came about?
I think that my parents were oddly rebellious in their own way, like as much as they could be. My grandfather was the minister of Kamnigyohe in San Francisco, which was the big church on Powell Street in Chinatown. So that was sort of a central location for a lot of Korean immigrants in the 60s and 70s. And in the 70s, somebody stole the K, which is the big...
oh my God.
So in 1977, somebody stole the K, which is the big Korean banking system that everybody pools their money into. And so at that time, there was a huge scandal and nobody wanted to go to that church anymore. So at that point, that was sort of this jumping off point where everybody decided to kind of go their own way. All of the immigrants kind of were like, oh, we're just going to do our own thing because everybody in this community obviously doesn't care about the other Koreans. So my parents decided to take their money and invest in something different. And my dad had always had these kinds of ideas about having a bookstore like City Lights, which is the big beatnik bookstore in San Francisco. So one bookstore came up for sale, which is called Paperback Traffic, which is a gay bookstore in San Francisco, and he bought it. And he really enjoyed having this business there for about 15 years. He really loved the community there. It was a fun time. I mean, there was a lot of amazing people that I got to meet and a lot of amazing experiences that we had. But it was a strange thing, because Koreans, I think, especially that generation, Koreans are naturally very conservative. Yes. There's this idea that gayness somehow doesn't exist. Even in Korea now, it doesn't exist.
We don't have gays.
No, they do have a gay pride, but the people wear masks. I mean, not even during the Corona thing, but they wear masks. People are not out really. I know a lot of gay people that are not out, that can't be out in any way. People are very, very conservative about that still in this day of time. And, it's still very strange. So I think having somebody steal the K was a very kind of pivotal thing. It's a strange thing when somebody betrays the trust of a community like that.
So your family must have been super established in San Francisco, right? When you have the grandfather who's the head of the church, they know everybody. Yes. And so everyone knew you because you're the granddaughter. But
it was kind of like I was also pretty rebellious myself and not very into, I kind of was so...
You can pick up the dog. Can we see your dog?
She's she's facing me, so she doesn't want to be a part of this.
Does she doesn't want to get on camera?
Hi. She's very anti... She hates...
Look at her.
She hates streaming. She hates streaming. She hates Instagram.
Her little tail was on Instagram recently. Her little butt tail.
Her little butt tail. She hates the internet. She's really anti. She's really
She's trying to keep you real, Margaret.
She's trying to keep it real. She hates any of this. No, but I think I was so rejected any kind of... I think I went to school too much. I went to too much. I was so entrenched in it that I really, by the time I was a teenager, I really rebelled. By the time it was the 80s hit, I was I'm sick of this. I don't want to do this anymore.
I've had enough. You're out.
Yeah. I didn't want to do it anymore. I got sick of it. This is the 80s. I put sun in my hair and I got that crazy, orange weird hair that I think we went on a vacation in Hawaii and I put sun in and lemon juice in my hair and it went all orange and I just went crazy and I'm not going to go to church anymore, and then it was a big scandal.
Yeah. Well, so many people feel that, I've had enough, I can't do this anymore. But very few people actually break out and you were financially independent from your parents. You dropped out of high school. I mean, this is not something typical Koreans, no matter how rebellious, that they ever do.
Right. That was really scandalous. I mean, it was scandalous, but also kind of, I don't know. I think it was also something that I'm glad I did it. It was hard, but also at the same time, I don't think I had a choice because it was so important for me to do comedy and to do my own thing. And I was never a good student. So in a sense, it was kind of easy because I wasn't very good in school. Like I had gone to Lowell, but I was only able to really go for 2 years and I couldn't survive there because I wasn't a good student. Like I just couldn't survive.
So then did you move out of home?
Yeah. So I was living in this like weird, I was in San Francisco. I was living in this weird house that was an old, it was a converted convent that was across the street from a hospital on the other side of Haight Street, across from the Panhandle. And it was in San Francisco. And this is like in the 80s. It was $125 a month. Can you imagine? And it was a converted like Victorian, and it was an apartment, but it was $125.
But how old were you when you moved there?
I was probably about 17.
That's young, yeah.
Young. And I lived there, and I lived in a couple of different situations. Like I lived with friends. I lived in different types of places. I also moved around a lot. I was doing stand-up comedy and traveling.
So that's so fascinating, Margaret, because I feel like your parents came around pretty easily compared, like if I tried to pull something like that, I think they would have physically restrained me.
Yeah.
You were able to still come home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. It wasn't like you were disowned. That whole thing, like you're out of the family. You're dead to us.
No, but I think that because I was so independent so early on, and then the fact that I became successful so early that I was able to support myself so early on too, that I was financially independent by the time I was about 18, made a big difference. And that I was also on television by the time I was about 19. Because Koreans are really all about status too, so that they could show their friends, that I was doing well.
Right.
That they could see evidence of that my performances on television by the time I was 18, 19. And in San Francisco, that success was very apparent very early. It made all the difference. So,
and it was apparent to the whole country, right? I mean, you are nationally famous. So,
yeah, but most of it was my dad. This is so Korean. He was very resistant to it in my teens, and then my parents went to a mudang. And the mudang said, "Oh, she's going to be internationally famous in 2 years."
We should explain for people what a mudang is,
So a mudang is a Korean shaman, usually a woman. It's like if you ever see like in Kdramas, there's like a woman who's like dancing on top of a sword, or she's got like a pig's head and like an umbrella or a bunch of bells. That's a mudang. They have like a ceremonial table, and there's like a bunch of like food and like dried fish, and they have like an old costume, and they have like crazy makeup. That's a mudang, and it's old. It's the old religions.
So she told your dad, "Don't worry, Margaret's going to be famous."
Yeah, and internationally famous within 2 years, and that was the only thing that convinced him. He was like, "Okay, that's fine then," because he only
tried to track her down.
No,
you need to try to track her down.
But it was the street. It was the one that had. It wasn't even like a really famous mudang. It was the one with the street that has the tteokbokki.
It's the garden variety neighborhood mudang.
Yeah, the mudang. There's like a street. There's like, I don't know if it's like, there's like one. There's like some street in Seoul. There's like one side that has tteokbokki, and then the other side has mudang. It's that one. So it's not even like a famous like old school mudang. It's like that one. It's so strange.
You're the original Korean American. You're the one who kind of broke out early. You were on your own, and you kind of blaze that path and, doing research and just looking up all of your, archive and all the things that you've done over the years, it occurred to me that I think Korean Americans owe you an apology for not supporting you and really being there for you when you were out there on your own. And I don't think we were really together as a community really back then. And we've really come together much more as a community that supports and celebrates other Korean Americans, and celebrates differences a lot more now. But when you were out there, I feel like everyone was just trying to conform and fit in, and we didn't come out and support you.
I think it's hard because when you're, it's a difficult culture, it's a difficult time when I first emerged as a comedian, it was also a difficult time for Koreans too, because it was right after the LA riots. So my first appearance was really shocking for a lot of, not Korean Americans necessarily, but for Koreans who were in America, who had sort of not necessarily even kind of identified as Korean Americans, there was this sense of real protection over their image, because the first time they had seen themselves on television really was in news coverage of the riots. Yeah. And so they were extremely protective of the way that they were perceived, and didn't want necessarily to be seen or heard as American, or, in that time period, like all of the signage in Koreatown was in Hangul. You didn't have a sense of Americanization in Koreatown. You also didn't have a sense of this real thing of like, we're going to stay here, like we're going to be American. I think the mentality, even amongst like people in my family, was we're going to be here for a while, we're going to make money, and we're going to go back. And so there was a thing of like, when Koreans saw me, there was like this like alarm of, first I was a woman. First I was very much not an ideal representation of what we would perceive as not 얌전해, total 기집애, total like
that needs to be a t-shirt.
Just loud, very large, very like Americanized, very much not like this sort of polite kind of delicate sort of representative or diplomatic representative that would sort of asked for, and I think that was a kind of a scary thought of like, wait a second. We didn't ask for this. We didn't present this. And what do we mean? Because I think that when we thought of sort of like Korean American representation or Korean representation before that with comedy, it had been Johnny Yoon, who was a member of the Rat Pack originally. He was a friend of like Frank Sinatra's and like Dean Martin's. He played golf. He was an interesting guy. He was a comedian, but he was not American. He was very Korean, and he would do the Tonight Show, and he was a good representation because he was really like sort of very much the eternal foreigner, and he was delightful for Koreans because it was this thing of like, oh, I get that guy because he's just like, he's charming and funny, but he was total ajashi, it was like this thing that they could relate to. So for me, it was like this thing of the people were scared. So I would get in arguments with Koreans, and I feel bad now because I also didn't understand like you're respectful to people who are older than you just because. And now I get that. I really understand that now, and I feel bad the way that I treated people who were trying to relate that to me or who were so alarmed that I didn't understand that when I was younger, and I would like to make that up to them now, but they're all dead. So, and now that I'm the older person, now I'm like, yeah. I get that now because everybody that's younger than me, all of the younger Koreans are so respectful to me now, and I feel bad because I didn't do that.
Well, when you're young and you're trying to prove yourself and make your way, and you're getting all kinds of mixed signals and pushback, it's very hard to keep that in mind. You were just making it.
Yeah, there's a reason why it exists, though, and it really resides inside you, and you're like, oh gosh, I really missed an opportunity, because there's a reason why you do that. When you get older, you recognize like, oh, I should have done that because now I don't feel like I deserve it. You know, like there's like something inside you that really is like, oh God, like this is awful. Like I should have done that when I was younger.
You know,
you were especially young when you hit it big. So
it's interesting because I feel that I had that so instilled in me that it's reflexive for me. Like whenever I see older Koreans, even though they speak much better English than I do, I insist on only speaking Korean to them in my broken English because it's more respectful. And, you know, I'm always like, I take a different tone and I'm always like, you know, and it's because it was so ingrained in me from a young age that even if I didn't understand it or wanted to break out of it, I don't think I could.
Yeah, it's something that I think I rejected pretty young. I feel like I was almost like my earliest memories were speaking out of honorifics because people would laugh. Like I remember when I was in Korea and really young, and after my father got deported, and we were staying in Korea with his halmoni, and she would be taking care of me, and I would be speaking out of I would be speaking like not in honorifics to her because I didn't know. And they would laugh, like she would laugh because I was just calling her, no, like, like, ima, like to her, like, yeah, to her. And she would laugh, and they would be so laughing because I would be addressing halmoni as yeah, like, and they would laugh. They would be so tickled that this like 3-year-old would be saying that. So I think that I got used to that, and it was so like ridiculous that it was somehow amusing to older people that was happening. So to me, it sort of became like this thing that I just internalized was amusing.
I'm curious about your dad's deportation. What was that about, and how long?
It was so traumatic, you know, like this thing where like he just overstayed his student visa, and it's such a thing of like, it seems kind of like a harmless thing, but that really does. It does happen, and it's really terrifying, you know, when you just don't go home. You're here for a student visa and you just don't go home. And it seems like it's like not a big deal, and it's such a big deal. And
so someone came for him at your house, and
I don't know this exactly. Like they never talk about the situation of like who came or what it was, but we just left, and having to like sort of decide who goes or when and what. You know, it's something that they never really clearly discuss or talk about. But we were separate. Like so, my father took me, and my mom stayed in America. She was here for, I think, about 2 years by herself, and then he was there with me. And so it's a very strange period where we were sort of like not together for like it's a very blank, strange time. That there are so many blanks in our history that the family they don't address. They have no explanation for. And that's so true, I think, of so many Korean Americans. We have so many blanks in our family history that they don't really address, that there's no stories about, there's no explanations for, that there's no talk of.
For sure.
There are a few specials that you have been a part of where you've partaken as a special guest or a host. And one of the shows that we found was The Masked Singer. So could you tell us a little bit about that project and how you got involved with it?
I was asked to do it on the first season, and I watched it when they sent me. I never saw it when I was in Korea, but they sent me some clips of it, and it was so exciting. I was so excited to be involved in it. I love singing anyway, and it's a big passion, and I really, my family is a very musical family, and so my father plays piano and my mother is a guitarist and a singer. So they always have sort of surrounded me with music my entire life. So that's another thing that we always do. And I really enjoyed it. I love that we got to be so involved in this sort of secrecy of being in these different locations, and they would put people in the costumes that weren't the actual contestants. So you really didn't know. I had a great time doing it. It was fun.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know how often, like let's say in the past 10 or 15 years, you've traveled to Korea and what that experience is like. Like what are the fans like in Korea? How are you perceived?
I've been there about, I've only been there about three or four times. I really enjoy it. I know that there's some awareness of who I am. The people who do know who I am really are the people in show business. What's exciting is like if I've gone to work, like I've been there, I've appeared on their version of SNL. And this is where I really feel that elder experience is when I go in, all of the cast members stand up and they bow really fast. And it's really funny because it's like, these are really famous people, I think. And they're like, and it's so touching. And I think it's really beautiful. But I really love them. Their work ethic is very intense and they work so hard. And it's quite, it's challenging, and it's, it's definitely a world that I would love to break into. I'd love to go more. I think that their show business is so exciting. I'm a real fan of Kdramas and all of their show business in general. I think it's really imaginative and it just, I don't know, like I'm just really moved by everything they do. So I'd love to go more.
Okay. So I don't really speak Korean. So any K-drama I'd have to watch would definitely have to be subtitled. And I've never really gotten into them. So which one should I start with if I were going to watch a K-drama or two?
I think Itaewon Class is a really good entry point. Itaewon Class is like a great starter one because it's got everything. And it's also got like the new direction of where Korea is headed. I think that South Korea is really trying to expand its ideas about where it wants to go in terms of race and class and, LGBTQ rights. I think it's trying to really change its idea about who it is. And I think Itaewon Class is like the first step in that direction. And I think,
and what's like an old school one what's like an old school one that you watched years ago that was one of your favorites? Like something you and your mom would watch together. Is there something that she would watch?
I think Replay 1988 it's not old school, but it feels like it's 1988. We watched it in quarantine, but it was like being with my parents in Korea in 1988. And it was like, the whole time I was just like, this is wrong because it's so time machine. It was really good.
Wow. I've only been to Korea once in my whole life. It was in 1989. So that's
okay.
Korea.
They also go there. It also goes to 1989 too. So it goes from 1988 to 1989. You might be in it.
I might be the star of that whole show.
You're probably in it.
So Margaret, does your mom enjoy a certain kind of celebrity because you talk about her so much, like within her circle of friends or in San Francisco? Does she get recognized on the street?
Oh, yes. She loves it too. She is the real star. And she's very much aware of that. And she lets it kind of sort of makes it like her, I think because I feel like a lot of times she has that sort of thing of like ajumma invisibility. Sometimes ajumas feel really invisible. Mm-hmm. So like, I think that's really important to make her feel seen. And I do think that it's really important. So yeah, she loves it. And I think it's really good for immigrants in general, like immigrant parents to feel seen. I think the immigrant experience kind of gets like, neglected in the American experience. And so, but it's all Americans' experience. So I think it's really important to be told.
I think if your mother enjoys this celebrity has had a very unusual experience, she should do her own story on Korean American Story. She should tell, we do this video series where we just have people talking about their experiences. She would have a lot of good stories about you.
Oh, yeah.
Would she love to talk about her experience raising you?
I think so. I think she would be shy. I think she would make my dad do it, but then she tells him what to say. So it's kind of confusing because she'll push him forward and then she'll stop him and tell him what to say. So yes, they would both do it.
Well, who's the funny one? I know your dad wrote joke books, right?
Yeah.
But is there one real storyteller in the family?
I think they're both pretty funny. They're kind of becoming each other. So I think that they both are, they sort of become one, but I think they're both equally funny.
I would love to hear what they have to say about you after all these years.
Yeah. I'm sure they would have a lot.
Their say. That would be fascinating.
That would be great.
And I wanted to ask about your fans. So you have, I think, some of the most devoted fans. I'm sure you get a ton of fan mail and messages from people telling you their stories of how you've helped them. Can you tell us about some of the more memorable interactions you've had with fans? Or
people have been amazing. People have been so amazing throughout every experience in my career. It's been phenomenal. And I mean, I'm really lucky, that I've been able to connect with so many people. And, through social media, it's become a lot easier. There's a lot of people that I've been able to connect with and become friends with actually over time. It definitely feels more like friendships. If you've been seeing the same people and connecting with them for like 30 plus years, it definitely is friendships at this point. Now it's like very close. So I'm really lucky.
Wow. I would think I could see you developing friendships, but I feel like you have a status almost like a guru for a lot of people. They're looking to you as a beacon of inspiration because you've always embraced, let's say, misfits and people try to figure out their lives.
Yeah.
And
I think it's nice. I think it's really hopeful. And I do definitely feel that too, especially for a lot of like Asian American comedians and gay comedians who are younger and coming up, and people who have definitely felt like they wanted to do this for a career and wanted to feel a sense of like, this was a good way to go. This was like a good thing to do. And so definitely for people who like wanted to choose this path of like being in entertainment, especially for Asian American comedians, like that's for sure a big thing because they just were so worried that their families wouldn't accept what they were going to do with their lives. And then they could sort of show their parents, oh, like, well, she's doing it. And they're like, okay, be able to sort of see like this is possible. So yeah, for sure.
Like Aquafina, I loved how you were in her video.
Yeah.
That was
she's
amazing.
So amazing. And we actually filmed that here at my house. And she's so special. She's a great performer. What a talent. And she's just so incredible. And I think, there's so much in store for her.
Would you like to share with us some current projects you're working on? We heard that you have you're working on something for Amazon.
Well, I know that I'm going to be doing podcasting. I'm going to be touring next year when we're all finished with this pandemic. It's kind of this weird thing where I really haven't stopped touring for 30 something years. So it's a weird year this time being home because it made me realize I haven't stopped for so long. So stopping for this long is very shocking, but it's oddly kind of nice because I didn't know I hadn't been here. I actually haven't unpacked since the 80s. So finally kind of unpacking has been kind of oddly nice. So it is strange, but I mean, I really do miss touring. I really do miss performance, and I'm looking forward to going back to it. And so I will go to Korea next year. I was supposed to do it this past year, but I will go next year. And I will go to Japan next year. I'll go to Australia. Everything will happen that was supposed to happen this last year will happen next year.
And in general, quarantine, what's your routine been like? I know the podcast keeps you quite busy because you're very rigorous every Tuesday. You really do it every week, right?
Yes. And I have been perfecting sous vide kalbichim.
All right.
I'm doing the 72-hour kalbichim.
Wow.
You know, you thought it was the apples and pears. It's actually plums that do better in the kalbichim. But it's all experimentation. So I'm doing a lot of cooking, and I'm doing a lot of cleaning, and I'm doing a lot of Kdramas, which are pretty great. Kdramas are really kind of saving me during the pandemic. There's a lot of them to watch. So I like, right now, I'm liking Mystic Pop-Up Bar. That's my latest one. Another good one was a Prison Playbook, which was really a lot of male bonding. Really funny. And there's really Hospital Playlist, also very good. And It's Okay Not to Be Okay as the latest. Everybody loves it. And if you want to go dark, Flower of Evil, very dark. And A Stranger 2 is out also. So very good.
I have a lot of watching to do.
Yeah, there's lots of K-dramas, thank goodness, because there's lots of time.
I love this list.
If there was a K-drama where they only said things like brush your teeth, do your homework, and stop fooling around, I would get it. That's about as much.
They do a lot of that in Reply 1988. So I think you would be good, pretty good.
Gabajima.
Tarojima.
Exactly. So thank you so much, Margaret. We loved having you.
Thank you.
We want to thank Margaret Cho for being our guest on kpod. We've admired Margaret as the only Korean American voice in entertainment for years, so it was very special for us to speak with her. The photos that accompany this episode were shot by Margaret on her phone, which I remotely directed by Zoom. They turned out remarkably well, so thank you, Margaret, for partaking in our COVID photo shoot. If you want to check out Margaret's K-drama recommendations, you can find them in our show notes. You can find her on Instagram at Margaret_Cho, and her podcast is The Margaret Cho. Please follow kpod on Instagram at kpodpod. Our editor is AJ Valente. Our producer is Jessica Park, and our executive producer is HJ Lee.